Hello and welcome everyone to the second episode of Indian Search Marketing Academy. And today we'll be speaking about WordPress and how to speed it up. And we have two amazing experts with us. We have Jason Barnard, who is father of SEO is AEO, and he's also the owner of SEO is AEO podcast. And he's amazing, guys. He's just amazing. So I don't want to introduce him myself because I think he can say a lot of funny and interesting things about himself. So, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Nitin. It's great to be here. I'm terribly pleased to be with Jono because he's super smart. So I'm going to do the simple bit, and he's going to. I want to charm him. But in fact, yeah, I do SEO is AEO today. It's the hashtag SEO is AEO. Search for that, and you'll find loads of great interviews that I've done with people like Jono, and they're great, not because I'm great, but because they're great, and they share phenomenal amounts of information, really great insights, and it's good fun to listen to. For once, we can do digital marketing, learn about digital marketing, and it's fun and informative, and I think interesting too. A little bit about my history is my initial job is in fact a double bass player. So I was a double bass player for 8 years, professionally professionally touring France and Europe, playing the double bass and making a living, and that was great. And then I was a blue dog in a cartoon. So if you look up Bouwa and Koala, you'll find me being a blue dog and singing songs. And now I'm in SEO, and it's great.
Wow, that sounds good. Interesting history. Yeah, and guys, so Jason was a bit concerned about his background. He was saying that it's kind of boring, just white wall behind, right? But I'm sure no one can even concentrate on his background because foreground is really interesting.
Because I keep waving my
amazing smile and bright red teeth, right?
Thank you. You're so kind. I'm almost Italian, kind of in my enthusiasm with waving my arms. Yeah, no, but it's because Anton from SEMrush, who's the kind of super video guy, who's always telling me you have to have an interesting background, and he points to Jono's background, but he does say, Jono, maybe you should tidy up a little bit.
That's not my desk. That's Sam's desk. Mine's really tidy. You just can't see it.
Yeah, so it's great to be here, and I'm really, really pleased to be talking about WordPress site speed and share what I know, which I think will help people with the simpler stuff, and then learn from Jono in the second half with what you can really do to push it to the limit.
Yeah, pleasure is all mine. It's really a pleasure for me to host you along with someone like Jono. So amazing, guys! I just love you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, we love you.
Once again, yeah, so much love in the air, right? All right, so welcome once again, Jason, and let's move to the next expert, who is Jono. I don't think this guy needs any introduction, but still, I would really, really encourage him to just, say tiny stuff about him, like what he's focusing on these days, and whatever.
Sure. So thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here and do these SEMrush webinars. This is great. Also nice to be doing one on a Monday morning rather than at 11 p.m. On a Friday. No, it's great to be here. Thanks. So I'm Jono. I currently run special ops at Yoast, so people will know the Yoast plugin, hopefully, especially if they're into the WordPress world. I do bits of research and development and product stuff and make sure we're building stuff that's useful for people like our viewers, which is really cool. I'm a technical SEO and a nerd and obsessed about site speed and really, really obsessed about WordPress. So this really is my sweet spot, like WordPress and SEO and site speed all together in one thing. So I'm really looking forward to just chatting through with Jason about a whole bunch of interesting stuff and tips and tricks that people can do. I think we have a structure and some stuff we want to talk through. It would not surprise me if we just end up going off that rail a little bit and chatting through some useful stuff, and hopefully that'll be helpful. But yeah, always a treat, and always a pleasure chatting with Jason as well, who has a unique superpower of being able to cut through everybody else's stuff and just find the thread that joins it all together, which is really
absolutely
awesome.
And that's a superpower. I like that.
Yeah.
Once again, welcome, Jono. It's a pleasure to have you here. I'm really looking forward to hear some great tips from both of you. I know you can just make it amazing. So my job is pretty easy today. All right. So, and then it's me. So I'm Nitin. I work at Omio, which was known as GoEuro before, but now it's Omio because we want to go global. And GoEuro is kind of European name, right? So that was the plan. And yes, and I love technical SEO. and I'm hosting this webinar and it's my pleasure to have these two guys here. So that's about me. And before we start, I would like to apologize for rescheduling this webinar because of some technical glitches. So Hangout was not working for some reason, so we scheduled it for today. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and showing wonderful support and understanding the technical glitches. And yeah, for your love, which is there forever, I guess. All right, so I think now we can quickly jump to the real stuff that you all are waiting for. We want to hear some really, really cool tips from Jason and Jono. So we can start with Jason, who would be talking about some really good things. So Jason, stage is all yours now.
Yeah, great. I've got the slide deck, so I'm the one who's going to be sharing my screen. I just literally changed it this second to put Jono on it because I'd only put.
Oh, thank you.
And I thought that was rotten. So I advise following Jono on Twitter. Always terribly intelligent and very funny. Today, talking about making WordPress faster. Now, for me, the focal point of this whole thing, once I went through the whole process, was there are three beneficiaries, and I think that's something you need to remember. Your users. You want to make your WordPress site fastest for your users. Now, this is something that I found through one of Jono's presentations, that we're aiming to get under 1 second. I mean, why is 1 second that super, super important number? Probably can't read that because it's very small, but what happens is that after a second, people's attention wanders. They call it the magic threshold of 1 second. If it takes more than a second for them to see something on your website, somebody's mind will wander and they might start doing something else. And when they do get onto your page, they'll have half forgotten what it was they were looking for in the first place. So you need to make sure that your site is sufficiently fast to have something showing to them within a second, preferably having the site interactive. And Jono's going to talk more about that later. The second benefit,
I think, is just on that, if I might just jump in, I think that's really important. There's something, so I think this idea that it's all about the users and their attention is really important, because the difference between a second and 2 seconds, I'm probably not even going to consciously notice, but I'm definitely going to get distracted. And if subconsciously I think, oh, maybe I fancy a cup of tea, or I'm going to open another tab or check Twitter, then that might mean I'm less likely to convert or to buy or to fill out a form. And very few of your visitors are sat there thinking, I'm annoyed that this took half a second too long, but they're definitely starting to think about other things. So yeah, it's not about microseconds annoying people or causing bounce rate. It's about that focus and the attention, and getting it under that 1 second. It feels instant.
What you just said, I mean, we're making a cup of tea, maybe not, but opening a new tab and doing something else is something I do all the time when the site is slow. It gets on my nerves and I go and do something else, and I've forgotten what I was doing by the time the site's actually loaded. But the other thing, and I talk about the journey from the search to the meta title, which attracted my attention, to the description, which encourages me to click by promising me the solution, to arriving on the page. Now, if you've got more than a second, that break kills my intention, and I've forgotten what I want to do. And so what I always tell my clients is, however fast or slow your site is, always having the H1 the same message as you had in the meta title, because that makes sure that I'm comfortable that I am in the right place. And if it has taken more than 1 second, I haven't forgotten what I was looking for.
That idea, that promise is really important. I think that consistency of messaging, that's a core marketing 101 thing, right? Is you tell people what to expect and then you give it to them. And if there's a break in the middle of that, you're going to lose focus.
Yeah, and that break is anything over a second to load the site. Brilliant stuff. So your users need it to be under a second. And now the second beneficiary is Google. And I think this is where a lot of us come from. We think Google, 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 and we've forgotten that first one, which is your users. But Google, because it switched to mobile first indexing last year, it's now judging you on the mobile performance of your website. I was talking to Chris Liversidge about that, and he was saying it judges you on a 3G network. And a 3G network has a thing of being very slow. And even if in Paris, I'm in Paris now, and I'm actually using my mobile phone, my mobile network, to do this webinar, and it's fine, I hope. So on 4G, it's very fast, but on 3G, it isn't. So you have to kind of come back and think, right, not only is Google judging you on speed, but it's judging on the speed on a very slow network. Then they had a speed update in July 2018. Sorry, I've gone a little bit off track. We have that mobile first indexing update in March, then another one in July for the speed update. Google are really pushing us for that. And they've got all these little tools that say, oh, if your site's slightly faster, you'll make another $181,325, which is...
Everybody wants that, right?
Yeah, I want exactly that sum as well, now that they've promised it to me. So they're pointing out the users too here. They're saying, actually, you're doing this for your users, or in fact, you're doing it for you as well, which is the third person on this list. And they have this web fundamentals, why performance matters, and they're really pushing it.
Like these guys are writing the rule book on what performance looks like. Like if you take one thing away from this today, if you're interested about improving your speed and understanding what you can do, just go read this. You can't quite see it here, but that left navigation folds out, and there are hundreds of pages on everything from how do I make my images smaller to how do I load fonts faster. Like, this is the best resource on the web for site speed and tactics and stuff you can do. And Google are just paving the way on that. It's incredible. It's really, really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and as you say, I mean, the other thing is, Google obviously benefits, but we have to remember that they are not so much that they're the boss, but if we want their traffic, we have to play by their rules, and their rules are right here. And if you notice in the top right-hand corner, there's a little icon of Jono. So I actually didn't know that this thing existed until I went and checked out Jono's slides. The thing about Google as well is you've got to remember it's a business. They're trying to make money. So when your site is faster, it's more efficient for them to crawl, and it costs them less, so they make more money. And anything that helps them make money, they're going to promote. They're going to give you advantages. So if you're faster, you're saving the money, they're going to do you a favor, if you want to look at it that way.
Yeah, like this is one of Google's... I'm sorry.
No, they're a business. This is one of Google's. Go ahead.
It's your 4G connection being slightly slow and me talking over you there. Like, this is one of their biggest cost centers. If they're having to visit and crawl and process all of these websites, if the images are a bit big and the code's a bit slow and the server's a bit far away, them visiting that, consuming the content, processing it, costs them huge amounts of money, like trillions of dollars, billions, trillions of dollars. So every kilobyte they can remove, every fraction of a second they can save is direct cost savings for them. So they're really, really motivated to make the web faster. So yeah, as you say, if you put your tinfoil hat on, even if you don't care about the users, which you obviously should, and even if you're doing this just to please Google, that's still a safe bet in the strategy, because this stuff turns into dollars for them, and they are a business and they're motivated to make money. So, like, for every possible reason, speed is where you should be focusing.
Yeah, and I really like what you just said. In fact, is I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, oh, well, I'm saving 5K on an image. Why would I bother? It's not such a big deal. But as you rightly say, it all adds up. Google are doing billions of pages a day, so each time one of those 5K images comes through, the extra 5K, it's spending money, and it adds up to trillions of dollars. And they're looking at it on that massive scale and saying, hey, you're saving me money. I'll give you a helping hand.
Yep.
And the third person, or third entity, or the third group of people who will benefit is you and your company. With users, if you're slow on mobile, if you're doing any kind of conversion on mobile, you can lose an enormous number of conversions by being slow, but you can also lose them on desktop. But mobile is where we're really focusing. If you're fast on mobile, you will convert more, you make more money. So just like before, Google's this business, they want to make money, you're a business, you want to make money, you want to get that conversion rate as high as you possibly can. And the other thing is, it's not just on that one visit, it's when people move forward in time. If they've had a bad experience on your site, next time they come, they'll have a negative opinion of you. And it's that when you walk into a room and the first 2 seconds are the moment when you know you're going to make friends or not. It's the same thing. You've got 1 second to make a friend, and if you've made that friend, it's very easy to keep them as a friend. If after 2 seconds you still haven't loaded, you've got to then catch up on that bad experience that you've shown them. This one, can you explain it?
Yeah. So this is a really poorly laid out slide, but it's one of the like go-to examples of just how important speed is on these user behavior factors. And there are 3 really popular studies. And the first is that GQ, big fashion brand, obviously everyone will know them, reduced their loading speed from about 7 seconds to about 2 seconds, and they almost doubled their organic traffic from Google just because they were doing better, they were targeting people better. And then the other side, famously, Google wanted to know how important this was, so they artificially introduced a 500 millisecond delay into the search results loading, and they lost 20% of their users because people were frustrated. They got a cup of tea, they opened another tab, whatever those behaviors are. And then Amazon did the same thing, and for every 100 milliseconds that they artificially slow down the product pages and the listing pages, they lose 1% of their total revenue. Which 1% isn't a lot, but of all of their revenue, it's huge.
It is huge. I mean, once again, you're talking at scale. But what I didn't know, and I'd heard that number about Amazon before. I hadn't heard the one about Google before, but the one with Amazon, I didn't realize they'd done it on purpose. I thought it was just they were kind of
to test the impact, which is why, like, because nobody ever complains, oh, that was 20 seconds, 100 milliseconds slower than I expected, because anything below a second is perceived as instantaneous. And it's not that people are angry or annoyed or frustrated. It's that lack of focus and the I'll open another tab, I'll look out the window, whatever it is. And it's that kills performance, because if people lose focus, they lose conversion intent, and you lose people. Scary.
Yeah, scary stuff. AliExpress, I mean, you can explain this one as well because it's your slide.
I don't think this one is, but it's the same principle, that just making even relatively okay sites faster. It's not just slow sites less slow. Going from fast to faster always has a correlation on bounce rate, on conversion rate, on sales, on revenue. It's always a no-brainer, and it's very, very rare to get to the point where anybody says, you know what, it's fast enough, because another 10 milliseconds might make all the difference in keeping that focus. So, it's just sensible to invest in this.
Yeah, and from the Amazon example, 10 milliseconds, which is absolutely nothing. If you can shave that off, you're making another 0.1%. And if you're talking $1 billion, 0.1% is probably something like 100,000, but I can't work it out off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's big numbers.
So you've got three bottlenecks to deal with: network performance. And if you can move closer to users, you can optimize caching and you can minimize size. I mean, those are things you know lots about, Jono. I just had a quick look. I mean, I had experience with CDNs about 10 years ago.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. Even back in the day, it changed the performance. I was doing a site for kids. That's the blue dog thing. I was a blue dog, and kids are very impatient.
Yeah.
And so I learned from the best, as it were. And as I moved onto the CDN, I got my content close to them. We were hosted in the US initially, and all of a sudden traffic and retention went up. We ended up with a time on site, an average time on site of 20 minutes.
Wow.
And with kids play games. They're just,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you can keep them occupied, if you can keep them entertained, which the games and songs do, and then you keep them on the site. And literally, we went up from 14 minutes to 20 minutes by moving closer to them, and that's
nice.
Phenomenal.
So every image that loads takes half as long. Every JavaScript file that's downloading takes half as long, and that lack of friction means you keep the focus more.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and kids are a good example. I mean, test something on your kids or somebody else's kids, and you'll see how quickly they lose attention. And the more we move forward into this instant world where everything's immediately available, we're all becoming more like those kids.
And Google too.
Yeah.
Like, assume Google is a distracted 5-year-old, and that's what you need to be optimizing for.
Oh, I'm going to quote you on that. Google's the back-end performance, that's your server. If you can get your server faster, and once again with my kids example, I worked on the server an awful lot to get that initial connect time and the initial sending of the data. Once again, for kids, if you can keep them entertained after, it used to be kind of a couple of seconds. If you keep them interested, you were away. Now it's down to 1 second, and that shows how fast things are moving. And every time there's a request to your server, it adds a little bit of time to the overall performance. This image, I've got no idea why I put it there.
So this is my favorite metaphor for how to think about back-end performance. I'm conscious we're not giving many specific tips yet. We'll get into some of that in a bit, but I think you need to understand some of the framework for how to think about this stuff in order to know where to go and where to start and what's important. This is your website. It is a complex machine made of many, many conveyor belts with different routes and different parcels and packages. And when somebody types in your site or clicks on a search result, this whole thing wakes up and cranks up, and all the rollers start moving and the boxes start working towards the end. And then they get the final page, which is composed of all those parcels. Now, in WordPress particularly, these things get messy. And you'll see in that picture, there are different routes they can take and things that lift up the boxes and check what's in them and put them back down on different bits, and they go on and over and through. Every plugin that you have, everything your theme does, every custom piece of functionality that you've built is designed to make this conveyor belt more complex. You're saying, if it's red, send it that way. If it's blue, send it that way. Change this piece of content, add this code. As that gets more complicated, it gets slower because it has to do stuff, not because plugins are inherently bad or because WordPress is inherently slow. Neither of those are true. It's just doing lots of complex stuff, in which case you have essentially two things you can do. You can either remove and reduce the complexity. So I don't really need this plugin. I don't really need this custom functionality that takes a lot of processing to add something fairly simple. Or you can speed up the conveyor belts. And that's where we get into the world of hosting and infrastructure and servers. But for a lot of people who can't make structural changes to how their site works, you can at the very least have a faster conveyor belt, have hosting that's designed to make those changes happen more quickly, that can anticipate how it needs to structure. So this kind of mental model for how it all works, I think, is really a great way of understanding where your trade-offs are.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely brilliant, Jono. Wonderful. Wow. And you mentioned hosting, and we've got all of these as DIY sites like DigitalOcean, and Amazon Web Services. I find Amazon very difficult to deal with.
Oh, God, yeah.
Managed self-medium small medium sites. I've used WP Engine, and they're very, very good because you plug it in. And what I did notice is we had one client who kind of, how can we put it, cheated a little bit on his site. He'd messed with it. And he couldn't get it going. We couldn't get it going on WP Engine, who don't accept it if it's not following the WordPress.
Yeah, they've got really strict standards on what they will and won't allow, and things like plugins. They're really good. I mean, a lot of their speed and the way they ensure speed is by not allowing things which make a mess of your conveyor belt systems. Like they have banned plugins and blacklists, so they just don't allow the messy stuff.
Yeah, which I mean, when you're installing, it's very frustrating. But then when you put it like that, you're saying, yes, that's 100% what I want. I want it to be fast, and for them to make it fast for me, they have to make sure that I'm respecting, in inverted commas, the rules.
Yes.
And the rules aren't actually very complicated. I think people get lazy, and a developer will say, oh, I'll just kind of put a piece of sticking plaster over that bit.
And WordPress makes that very easy, right? It's one of its great strengths and weaknesses is you can fudge it and hack it and take shortcuts. And then 5 years later, you've got a slow, clunky site riddled with technical debt.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know ServeBolt, but I do know that with a WP Engine, I can't hack and cheat. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I should caveat this slide heavily that this is very much personal opinion and stuff that I've tried and used and recommend. Do your own research, find your own price point and packaging functionality. But if you're serious about your website, make sure that your hosting company has somebody whose name you know, whose email you can reach, where you can have a real conversation, where they clearly have an opinion on your site and your setup. Like, it costs a bit more, but if you're spending less than $10, $20 a month, you're probably getting something that's old, that's slow, that's not well maintained, that's not well secure. I definitely know that these guys are really, really good choices for that sort of thing, but you will pay a bit more. There are hundreds of others, but at least think about and make sure that you're not just using a $5 a month off a shelf, because you're definitely slower and hurting as a result of it.
Yeah, and it's important as well to say these are examples, as you said, that you've used and I've used, and we're not associated with these sites at all. I mean, it's just saying these are some examples, as you say. Go and look around.
Yeah, I mean, these are good starting points for research, but choose your own adventure.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. And then the front end performance is the third chunk of latency. Is make the browser's life as easy as possible. I mean, you look at the browsers on lovely, lovely, lovely images of Chrome.
This is great.
But have some empathy for these poor browsers. They're struggling.
Yeah.
I mean, I know my Macs, I'm on some sites, and you can hear it heating up, and the CPU's going a bit bad. The fans come on. That shouldn't be necessary. That comes to this idea of don't blow. You know, don't put so much media on that you're going to kill the performance of the browser. Don't put on loads and loads of fonts because you think it looks lots prettier. There's no reason to put on 5 or 6 fonts. You can do it with 1 or maybe 2. Overdoing the interaction, trying to show too many bells and whistles with bouncy things all over the screen. Not only can that be annoying, but it also makes the browser work even harder.
I mean, the thing about
sorry,
try to slot in.
The JavaScript as well is. I mean, I think we want interactivity because we want to keep our users and we want to convince them. You just got to get the right balance of all this exciting bells and whistles, making it, but not making it so heavy on the browser. Sorry, that it struggles to deal with it. Sorry, go ahead, Jono.
No, thank you. Sorry. Two interesting things just came to mind. One is that people forget that your web browser is a piece of software. Like Chrome is software and IE software, and it has to work. So not only does your computer have to connect to wherever it's downloading all this stuff from all the servers, but then your physical hardware, your graphics card, your CPU, your RAM has to work to process all of that and display it. So yeah, if you've got a page that's heavily bloated in this kind of way, then that's a huge amount of extra effort that your computer and your physical hardware has to process. So custom fonts have to be rendered, images have to be painted to the screen. All of that comes with a cost. And great images can be really good for users, custom fonts can be really good for branding, and maybe there's a trade-off, but all of this comes with an exchange. So am I willing to have a slightly slower, slightly clunky experience as the page loads in order to show that trade-off? The other consideration, though, we had a really good question in the chat about one of the common things that the speed tools complain about is leveraging browser caching. So they all say, cache this better. The challenge with a lot of these types of things, your media, your fonts, and your JavaScript, is they're loaded from third parties. Like, I will get this font from Google Fonts, I will get this JavaScript from jQuery CDN. That means that not only is it having to load it all, you're having to go and get it from third-party places. You can take all of that and you can serve it locally. So you want to make sure you're trying to reduce the number of third-party bloated stuff, not just your own bloated stuff. And that will make a huge difference on that kind of cache management and fixing those issues when it says you've got to leverage browser caching.
Brilliant. Oh yeah, great. And if you add a CDN onto that and you can deliver it from near the user,
hell yes,
you're really winning. Yeah, brilliant stuff. We get that was some really practical, handy hints. I mean, I've been very much theoretical about it, and generally handy hints. How to measure? I mean, this is your bit. I almost called you Yoast, which would have been very strange.
It happens. It happens.
Go ahead. How do you measure it?
Sure. So, many of our audience will recognise this slide. For example, this is Pingdom's website speed test, and you put your URL in and it gives you some scores. I think the challenge with these is they oversimplify, and actually they give you a bunch of stuff that's not particularly useful. If you skip forward a bit, Jason, you can see that problems with all of these. So the problem is the scores it gives you aren't often actually scores. They're just hints about whether you've done certain things or not. And the load times it gives you are for that moment in time, for the URL you've tested, for the place it's testing from, which maybe isn't the same as your users who are on a 3G mobile device on the other side of the world from where you're testing. So you start to need to have empathy for the users. They always give you this like relative score, so faster than 91% of tested sites, you'll get something like that. And you think, okay, I'm doing really well, but that's against other people who've tested their site with this tool in like the last month. So that's a really small subset of people's experiences, and it's not representative of what your users are experiencing.
And also not necessarily in the same industry as you.
Oh God, yeah. And different sites and different places and different industries for sure, very, very different. And then the one useful thing it does give you is how big is this page and how many things is it loading? And if all you take away from this is I should have a smaller page that loads fewer things, that will definitely help, but you didn't need the rocket science to understand that. But these tools aren't great. And what is great is, that next one's excellent. Okay. This is Google's Lighthouse tool. You can access it as a Chrome extension. You can get to it in the Chrome Web Developer Tools. You can Google it. It's in there. They've got documentation. This is the only tool I would use and trust to measure and understand how your site is doing. And there's a few reasons for that. One is it does all that I'm going to pretend to be a slow mobile phone thing. You can just about see it says simulated slow 4G network, which is probably how many of your customers, and certainly Google, understand your site. It gives you a bunch of scores, so how are you doing out of 100%? And these scores, whilst not perfect, are much better than the other tools in the industry. But then it gives you some really good metrics. So it doesn't say you're faster than 91% of people. It says how many milliseconds until the site is interactive or until stuff's been painted on the screen, and how responsive is the mouse cursor. These things are really, really impactful. These are the kinds of metrics which, when they're bad, cause users to lose focus. Like if it takes...
Sorry, the first contentful paint and first meaningful paint, what's the difference?
So first contentful paint is how long until something turns up on the screen, whether it's anything like, when you fire up your mobile phone or your web browser, you hit the URL and then you get it just a white screen for some amount of time. The moment when you then get something that's text or an image is first contentful paint. First meaningful paint is that something useful? Is it more than just a background color or structure? Is it a hero image? Is it a header? Is it a logo? Like getting something on the screen which, as a user, makes me think, great, okay, this is doing something.
The other thing is, I remember like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, there was a thing going on, and they had a test where they showed you two sites next to each other, and I played with loads, and you were supposed to say which looks like it loaded faster, and that was Google, and they did, I would imagine, millions, billions of these tests on different people. So they're now using, and they use that, and then use machine learning to understand what our perception of a fast site is. And that's
and this is really key. Yeah, because speed as a concept is so complicated. Like, what does fast mean? You see just from the screenshot, there are so many ways of understanding how fast was this. What they really want to understand is how fast did this feel for users. And if your server responds immediately, but then it takes a little while for all your images to load, that might feel slow. But if your server is slow, but then all your images load instantly, that might feel faster. Like, which of those is faster? That there isn't really a right answer. What's really important, as you say, is that it feels faster. And these metrics are really good for trying to understand that. Like, getting something on the screen and getting all the interruptions and slow stuff out of the way makes it feel much faster.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Ooh, what's next? Oh, focus on. Yeah, the first meaning.
So focus, that's what we need.
And the speed index. I mean, I don't. I mean, we've talked about first meaning. What's the speed index?
This does a really good job of explaining it. It's like how long until stuff is turning up, and it's a way of kind of universally measuring that across all types of sites and all behaviors and interactions. And they do this video analysis. They say this is where they're recording all of the interactions and seeing how long it takes for stuff to turn up on the screen. And these are. Sorry.
What I really like about this is how much the concept of speed, as you said, has changed. It used to be how fast is a specific element, or how fast is the page, or when does the page actually load. And now we're looking much more at different ideas of what speed is, and it's a lot to do with user perception, which comes right back to the beginning. Is after a second we lose focus, and a good example is, of course, Yoast.
Excellent. Excellent.
First contentful paint is 2 seconds. Now Google says that's good, and it's not down at the second we were talking about earlier. So although very good,
we've got work to do still.
Yeah, I mean, you said that earlier. It never stops. You can still improve little by little and bit by bit, and that 88 could push up to 96. I would assume 100 would be when you get under 1 second. Is that?
Yeah, I think it's also worth dwelling on that for a second. The idea is that speed isn't something that you fix. It's a culture that you develop. And I know I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat coming in about how do I fix this specific issue? How do I improve this thing? We'll get onto those. But I think that's not the best way to think about this. The way you think about it is it will never be fast enough, because my competitors are also going to get faster. Google's expectations will get faster. Consumer expectations will increase. How do I continue to improve this and iterate and gradually make it faster and faster? It's not about fixing it once. It's about continually improving all of those metrics and getting to the point where that's part of your workflow.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Right, advanced diagnostics. Oh my lord, that looks very complicated. And I've no idea.
So this is one of the best ways you can get a feel for what's going on. You can just about see in the background that this is the page for this webinar. Oh no, sorry, this is the Australian one. Oops. Oh dear. But you get the idea.
I'm meeting Nick Ranger later on, so I'm happy.
Excellent. You can get some bonus points for this. So if you're on a Windows machine and you press F12, this comes up. It's in the network tab of the Google Chrome console. I think a Mac here there's an equivalent, but this looks a lot scarier than it is. This is a list of all the things that this page has loaded. This is like the web page test tool. It's like the stuff that Lighthouse is looking at. This is an overview of all the stuff that loaded. And on the right, you can see a waterfall chart of that. And you can start to see what's holding what else up. Where are their bottlenecks? Where are their issues? Where are their problems? If you skip forward a thing, there we go. You can start, like, you don't have to be a developer to start to see where there might be issues, opportunities, problems in this. You can see on the right where things are slow, like long bars are slow things. And then you can start to see why. You can see that about halfway down the page, we're loading a really big image. Really big piece of JavaScript from cdn.semrush.com. That's 357 kilobytes. That's a third of a megabyte. You don't have to be a developer to say this page is slower than it could be because we're downloading a huge piece of JavaScript. Then you can say, okay, what is this? Why is it? Who's in charge of this? Which developer do I need to talk about? Do we need to load all of this? Can we load some of it? you can look at this and very easily just refresh the page, see it load, and spot things where things are slowing other things down.
And that particular JavaScript file, I can see two things. One of it's got .min.js, which means they've minified it.
Nice.
Also, they're on a CDN, so they've done an awful lot of effort. It's just
yeah,
big.
It's just big, yeah.
And it's certain they're not using 357K of JavaScript on that page, because the page doesn't do very much. It's got a form on it.
No, exactly. And you can also see a bit further up, there's some interesting stuff. You can see two really long lines where it's loading two images. Yeah. But both from a CDN, as you say, both look reasonable. But those images appear way lower down the page. So on the initial load, maybe you don't need it. Maybe you wait until the page is loaded and wait till somebody scrolls and then you load it. And there are tons of WordPress plugins and Google Chrome native approaches for doing that kind of lazy loading stuff. But they hold up a whole bunch of other stuff loading, but they're not needed at that point.
Yeah, so I mean, load the minimum, show the minimum, and then lazy load the rest. I mean, and as you said, I mean, you're saying lazy load when people scroll. People might not scroll; they might just look at it and go on to another page. So you're also saving resources and making the page faster, and it's cleaner.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst this looks a bit complicated, it's the easiest place to start and find things. Like all you have to spot is bits that look slow or big. And this is chipping away at those is your easiest place to get easy wins.
Well, yeah. So we need to change our approach as a general rule to say speed is a culture, as you said, and then chip away bit by bit, day by day over time.
Yes.
Oh, what's this one?
Oh, this is my site. This is what it looks like when you get it right. You see the difference. You see how clean it is. You use the word clean. Clean is good. Like you can see that only the stuff that's immediately necessary is loading. And then there's a delay. And then all the stuff that's needed later down the page and all the bits of JavaScript load afterwards, everything is cached by Cloudflare on a CDN. Everything is small and everything is lightning fast. And that's the result.
And that vertical purple line is when everything is loaded for that first.
Yeah, that's the page is done. And then everything else can happen afterwards.
Brilliant. And all the numbers are like kind of 23 milliseconds, 19 milliseconds. I'm reading them out for people who can't see it. 30 milliseconds. I mean, none of your times are over 50 milliseconds.
No, this is on, I should say, this is on WordPress. This is on an off-the-shelf theme that I bought, running a bunch of plugins and running through Cloudflare. And it's just tweaking and chipping away and getting rid of stuff I don't need. Like I removed analytics from my website. In order to shave another 20 milliseconds off, because I made a business decision that I don't care how many people hit my homepage. It's not important to me in the way I work. And this trade-off on speed was worthwhile getting rid of it. Now, that won't apply to everybody, but definitely going through this and looking line by line by line, do I need this? Is it worth it? Like I've got all sorts of bits on and things like I've got some jQuery that validates people's input on the contact form. Is that worth the speed trade-off? Maybe. Worth analyzing. Like go through this with a fine-tooth comb. This is how you speed your site up. You interrogate every single one of these.
And that's a brilliant example, because you're saying, right, you've got this piece of JavaScript that verifies people's input on the contact page. Most people will have that loading on every single page on the site.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Which is rubbish.
Yep.
And you're not doing that, are you?
No, I'm just firing up my site in the background to remember the name of the plugin. I've got a really good one that helps manage which pages load which pieces of JavaScript. I think I mentioned it a bit later on.
Because I want to use it as well.
It is called Asset Cleanup.
All right.
Should be able to find it pretty easily. But yeah, that one's really good for saying only load the contact form JavaScript on the contact page, for example.
Okay, brilliant stuff. And the next one is, we're back to Pingdom Tools. I recognize that. And you've got a pretty slow DNS lookup there. Yeah,
this is the same kind of thing. If you skip forward a little bit, you can see some really interesting stuff. This is Pingdom's web page test, and this is yoast.com. And this is something I found. So this is, I've said order this by load time, and it's showed us like the second line is really slow, but it's a tiny piece of JavaScript. It's only 4 kilobytes. It shouldn't be that slow. But what's really interesting is you can see it's holding up stuff that happens next. So these bits of whatever these Google scripts are that load later can't load until that JavaScript is done. So we spent a bit of time, sat down with the developer, found out what was going on with that, and removed the bottleneck. And then everything that happens after that now happens sooner. And it's exactly the same principle. Like we want to remove those bottlenecks. We want to unlock stuff happening in parallel. It's the same kind of interrogation.
No, I mean, I love the idea of ordering it by load time, because it just changed my perception of no, but it does. I mean, I just take it by default and read through it and think, okay, we fix that. And when you do it that way, you immediately see where's it being held up.
Yeah, so that concept of things being held up is really critical. That you want everything to load at once. You don't want anything to be waiting for anything else. You want it to be able to do its own thing and to be clean and free. And any scenario where you've got like this chain of events delays everything that happens afterwards. So the more you can remove those chunky slow bits, the better.
Oh, brilliant. Can we have a different analogy to the factory one, have people waiting in queue at a bank or something?
Nice, yes, and you can't get so you get to the front and there are multiple queues. In fact, I don't know if we've referenced it in this deck, but there is an excellent presentation by Tom Anthony from Distilled about how HTTP web connections work, and the whole thing is an analogy of trucks going through tunnels. It's really, really good. You should be able to find it on SlideShare if you search for Tom Anthony, but it's exactly that. It's excellent.
And that's loads better than my bank example.
It's like the roads are different widths and there's different numbers of trucks and they can only go one at a time, and unless you make the road wider, it's beautiful.
Yeah, but I should have thought about my analogy before. And what's this one, man?
This is the coverage report, if you want to get a bit more advanced. So your really good example of you don't need to load the Contact Us JavaScript on the About Us page. This is how you find that out. And if you're running lots of plugins that are outputting lots of stuff and you're not sure where to start, this is really useful. So you go into the coverage bit at the bottom and you see the red and green bars. That's what percentage of that asset I've used on this page. So the second line in there is really embarrassing. That's so this is yoast.com. That's our main style sheet that loads all our CSS.
Yeah, and it's
on the homepage,
using like 2 lines of the CSS.
Yeah, so on the homepage, we're only using 10% of that, but we're loading a huge amount of it. So the action for us is go away and say, can we split this into 20 smaller files and only load the ones we need? And at that point, I'll hand it off to the developers and say, guys, you need to work out how we make this happen and how we structure it. But that's holding other stuff up. CSS is really render blocking. It's often really slow and it's really inefficient. And again, going back to the Google thing, we're sending them 90 kilobytes of CSS that they don't use and showing them 10% that they do every single time. That's really bad.
Yeah, okay. I mean, because some people's logic, and mine was that at one time, is I say, well, I'll get it all into the computer and into the browser right at the start, and then each subsequent page will be fast and it won't.
Yeah, and once upon a time that made sense, but and that was the way the web worked. But now it's all about modularization and only shipping small bits that you need, especially on that kind of 3G world.
Yeah, well, the 3G world has changed everything from that point of view. And the other thing I try and now tell my clients is, don't forget that people aren't necessarily coming through the home page. They can be coming through all these other pages. We're optimizing all the pages on your website. So we're encouraging Google to send people to the individual pages where they won't have that file cache. They're coming completely fresh. They're not a current user, so nothing from our site is already on their computer.
Absolutely.
We have to make sure that each and every page loads the minimum of assets to be able to function correctly.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a really good way. And again, that asset manager plugin is really good for managing this sort of thing.
Problem is, my clients never listen to me. Advanced things. The loading attribute, I like this. Loading equals lazy. Can we be that lazy and that code will work?
Yeah, you can. So this is awesome. This is really brand new. This has only just turned up in Chrome. Google announced it relatively recently as being available. So yeah, you can just about see what the picture on the right is trying to make out, the idea that when I load this page, I don't need to load all the stuff that's way down the bottom because the user can't see it. It used to be quite complex to do this. There were 100 different ways. Some of them weren't SEO friendly. It was a bit faffy. Now you can just put this code on your image. So your image source equals alt equals loading equals lazy. And this only works in Chrome, but let's assume that most of your users are Chrome and Chrome is winning the battle. This does it all automatically. Same thing on iframes, really, really easy. You could make some quite easy theme changes in your code or your plugins, your site to put this kind of code in, and it just works magically.
Really important question. If I put loading equals lazy, Chrome will respect it.
Yes.
But all the other browsers will just ignore it because they don't understand.
Yes.
It. So you can put it in anywhere. And I mean, you gain on the 70% of Chrome users, and the other ones just don't notice a difference.
Yeah, precisely. It's a no-brainer.
And Google is crawling with Chrome, so Google will see that. So we don't actually.
Yeah, and they also announced that. Yeah, they announced they're crawling with the most recent version-ish of Chrome now, whereas historically they've been using an old version. So they should respect this and understand it. It should work perfectly.
Yeah, Barry Schwartz told me all about the Evergreen Chrome thing when I was at SMX. I did an interview with him for my podcast. He was great about that. And I didn't know anything about it, but yes, they're using the latest version of Chrome. So this kind of thing will be not only good for your users who are on Chrome, but also show much better performance to Google when it's crawling. So it's win-win, no problem. Brilliant.
Yep. This is Squoosh. This is from Google, and it's shaking up the image optimization space quite a lot. I've played with it a lot, and it's significantly better than many of the tools out there for shrinking your images. Like, you take your big image, you put it in, you drag and drop the slider, you tick the boxes, you get a whole bunch of advanced settings, and you get to see and play in real time how much am I willing to sacrifice quality for size, and you spit out the finished version. It's really good.
Brilliant. And there's presumably a plugin for that.
I don't think there is yet, but I'm hoping there might be. But if you want to do stuff on a DIY basis, this is the one.
But I was talking to Joost, in fact, on another episode of my podcast to advertise it a little bit, but about Google working with WordPress. And this is the kind of thing, they're building plugins and they're checking plugins, and they've got Tide, which verifies that plugins are actually up to scratch. So we can expect this, if this is Google, to become to be more available to WordPress.
Yes, and in fact, if you skip forward 2 slides, because we're a bit short on time, I think.
Yeah, sorry.
This is the one more. This is
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. This is where it's happening. Google are really heavily involved with WordPress, and increasingly so. And where a lot of that collaboration happens is in AMP. I'm going to presume, for the sake of time, that everyone is reasonably familiar with AMP. If you're not, go check it out. It's like a different form of HTML that Google are heavily involved in that makes your website faster. The plugin, this official plugin, automatically converts your site to AMP. But that's not the interesting bit. I think the interesting bit is, as Google do more and more with things like verified plugins and integrating into WordPress and investing in speed, this is where that functionality will land first. Like, they'll use it to test new stuff, to get market share. If you want the shiny new speed toys, automatic lazy loading, automatic CSS fragments, tree shaking, all that sort of stuff, this is where all of this will land before your competitors get it a year from now. So it's worth going and looking at this.
Okay, and the loading equals lazy is part of AMP as well?
Well, technically not, but it does already automatically do lazy loading. I don't know if they're using that standard yet, but it handles all of that for you.
I mean, all I can hear now, since I talked about Google getting involved in WordPress, is Google really want to make the web world faster, and WordPress is 30% of the web world. Google are pressing loads in, so if you're on a WordPress site, life is going to get easier and easier, which is brilliant.
Oh yeah, like the degree, so some of the next generation of AMP stuff is going to start automatically updating AMP for your website. They had an example where they launched automatic light boxes on images. So if I click an image on the page, I get a nice Myrtle pop-up, really nice, just rolled out automatically to everybody on AMP, and there'll be more of that.
Brilliant. And
really
Cloudflare, we were talking about CDNs earlier on. I mean, I've used Cloudflare. It plugs into WordPress really easily.
Yeah, I mean, this is the magic bullet. Whilst I say speed is a cultural thing, if you want to shortcut all of the stuff, this is where you do it. These guys are to performance as WordPress is to the web. They are winning. They own the space. You plug it in, you switch it on. It takes 20 minutes, and your website just becomes fast. It doesn't solve everything, but it does a whole bunch of stuff. We've had questions about things like gzip and minification and caching. This handles all of that. You can go through and read all the documentation and click the buttons, but it really takes away a lot of those pressures.
I mean, when you said 20 minutes, I mean, literally, I plugged it in, and it took me less than 20 minutes, or more or less 20 minutes.
Excellent.
And as somebody who had never seen it before and didn't really know how it worked, I would suggest pretty much anybody could do it.
Yeah, I think there's very little reason not to. There are other CDNs in the space and similar stuff, but these guys are so good. And as you say, it plugs into WordPress really nicely. There's an official plugin that manages all the synchronization, and it just makes your site super fast automatically. It's really cool.
Which is brilliant, yeah. And WP Rocket.
There's a whole bunch of back-end kind of performance plugins, but these guys are really winning the space. It's pretty simple to use. It is a paid product, but I think it's absolutely worth it. Going tick the boxes, and it plays nicely with Cloudflare, which is important. So they talk to each other, and you get double the benefit.
I think, well, that's really important. I think kind of often we get advice from experts saying this one and that one and that one, and they've mixed and matched all these things to get them all work. And when you say that Cloudflare plugs into WordPress really easy, and the WP Rocket interacts with Cloudflare incredibly well, it makes everyone's life simpler.
Yeah. Like you can go and do all this yourself, but it takes a lot of time. If you don't want to spend on WP Rocket, I really recommend Auto Optimize at the moment. They're pretty new to the space, but they do a whole bunch of clever stuff that just speeds up the back end. Like both WP Rocket and Auto Optimize are really good for fixing that conveyor belt issue and streamlining that.
Yeah, now you've got the conveyor belt analogy. It just made immediate sense to me. That's a brilliant analogy. This is your favourite slide, is it?
It is. Like, this is the best advice. Like, just go out and win. Now you're armed with the tools you need. This is what you do next. Go out and embrace the rainbow unicorn cat.
Brilliant stuff. My eyes hurt.
Then it's done its job. Excellent.
There you go. I'm coming back, everybody.
Excellent. Go team.
Yeah, stop sharing. There we go.
There we go. Deep breaths.
Perfect. That was amazing. And guys, just to tell you that we didn't, plan for this doing it this way, but I loved it. I mean, it was amazing. Thank you so much, guys. I mean, and Jason, I mean, you do not need me, right, for this one?
I don't need you.
Yeah, but it was amazing. I loved it. I loved every single bit of it. I mean, for every topic, Jason was sharing some cool tips, and then Jono was talking about the same topic on advanced level, which was really, really cool. So thank you so much, guys, for making it so interactive.
Jason.
Yeah.
No, that was brilliant. I mean, Jono just knows so much, and it's so easy just to ask him questions, because I look at it and you go, I've got no idea what this means.
Yeah.
And Jono explains it and you go, oh yeah, it makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, I only had one question in my head when you were, just having your conversation. Do I really need for this one?
Yeah, you are needed.
Yeah. All right, guys.
This is where you come into your own. This is where you.
You're the good works.
So I'll answer all the questions people are asking here now. Yeah.
Great.
No, probably they don't want to hear me because we have Jono and Jason who are like super amazing when it comes to this topic. So let's quickly jump to the questions because we have so many of them, and most of these questions are really, really interesting. So let's start with the basic ones, because when you check your website speed using any tool, be it Google Page Speeds or Pingdom or GTmetrix, any tool you name it. So all these tools recommend some tiny things to every website. So some of them are like leverage your browser caching or using gzip compression. So Jono already spoke about that a bit, but Jono, can you give like more precise answer to these topics only?
Those tools just go through and follow the instructions. So typically there's two types of things. One is they'll say implement this kind of caching on your resources, which a plugin like WP Rocket or Optimize will do for you with the right settings. And then also Cloudflare will tidy up a whole bunch of the rest. When it's stuff that you're loading from external sites like Google Fonts or Google Analytics, there's not a lot you can do without some really advanced stuff, so I wouldn't worry about those. But definitely if it's stuff that's on your site, go and install those plugins, configure them, get Cloudflare in front of it, and it will compress the heck out of all of it and sort it for you.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thanks so much for answering that, Jono. And another question. So when you were talking about your website, there were 33 requests in total, right? And so now with HTTP2 in place with support multiplexing, what do you think about it? Like this number of requests, how?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So HTTP2 allows you to download everything at once, whereas in the past you had to download one thing at a time. You still don't want to be loading hundreds of requests. Like everything you load comes with a cost. Every domain you connect to comes with a lookup cost. Every resource you load, the browser then has to process and either show on the screen or read. So it's not just about HTTP2 shipping it faster to the user. Your browser still has to run all that JavaScript, has to process all the CSS. So it's not permission to just load lots of stuff. Sure, it loads more efficiently initially, but it still comes with a cost. So I would definitely try and stay lower than 100 requests.
Yep. Perfect. Thanks so much for answering that. But guys, again, for HTTP2 implementation is like just 5 minutes thing. And
Cloudflare does it automatically.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's an amazing thing. Just go for it. All right, the next question, maybe Jason this time. So the question is about CSS minification. How does that help, speed up your website?
Incredibly simply, it just takes all the space out. It takes all the useless characters out, makes the file as small as it can possibly be, which obviously makes it faster. But Jono was talking earlier on about only loading the CSS that's necessary for an individual page and splitting those CSS files down into smaller files. That would have more effect simply because the file itself is much smaller from the start. And if you then minify it as well, and then gzip it, and then put it onto Cloudflare.
Boom.
So great stuff, and it's really simple to do.
Yep. Cool. Thank you so much for answering that, Jason. And now the next question we have is about lazy loading. So I can probably challenge both of you to answer this question. Well, the question is, what is lazy loading? How does it affect your site speed? And then I would add another thing here. So there are many lazy loaders available in the market. So how do we compare which lazy loader is a good one and which one is horrible?
Well, I can start with the first one because Jono probably knows about the rest of it more than I do. But lazy loading, I mean, it's perhaps not the best term for it, just in the sense it doesn't really describe what it does, but it will load what you can see, what the person can see on the screen, what's within the window. So when you're at the top of the screen, when the page first loads, it will load the images in this example of that you can actually see in the top part of the screen, and the rest of the images are not yet loaded. And as you scroll down, it will load the images as you go down, which means that, as Jono was saying earlier on, you've got that first chunk. If you remember the purple vertical line on his site, you've got the page which is showing, and then nothing needs to load unless the person starts to scroll. Is that right, Jono?
Yeah, perfect. And so the other half was which approach should we use? There's two answers to this. One is if most of your visitors are on Chrome and Chrome devices, then Google's native lazy load option is probably your best option. Two things to consider in that world. Don't lazy load stuff that's at the top of the screen because you want that to load immediately. You don't want to wait for the page to load. And the other is consider that iframes will now lazy load by default. So if you're running a site that uses and relies heavily on advertising, your ecosystem might change. You might find that adverts that loaded and immediately loads down the page load less frequently. Your revenue streams might need to be changed and updated. In terms of if you don't want to use Google Chrome's native approach, we referenced the Web Fundamentals documentation, Google's page speed advice. There's a whole section in there about lazy loading, and it recommends 5 or 6 JavaScript libraries and has a whole bunch of detail on the approach. And their approach is the only approach I trust. It's SEO friendly, it's sensible, it's efficient. There's a few different JavaScript libraries they recommend. All of those are just plug and play.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering that, guys. That was amazing. I mean, I think it covered everything about this topic.
Yeah, done. Well, it used to be much more complicated, but now it's super simple, right? It's use Chrome's approach or go use Google's approach.
Absolutely. It's easy. It's easy now, and credit to you guys, right, for writing those amazing articles and these amazing webinars as well. So I can totally recommend this. And so the next one. So now someone is asking that when you talk about this topic, WordPress speed, you have a lot of plugins, but mostly they're focusing on desktop websites and not mobile websites. So do you think there is any specific plugin which can be used for mobile website only?
Oh, I think if you're still in a world where you have a separate mobile website, you've got bigger issues than caching.
Yeah.
So yes, there are scenarios where mobile experiences should be different from desktop, but in 99% of cases, you need a responsive website that builds mobile first and then expands to desktop. If that's not your setup, if you're running an m.domain, subdomain, or if you have a WordPress setup where you're showing a different theme automatically based on mobile visitors, those are going to cause you problems. That's not the way that Google wants the web to work, and it's not always best for users. And many of the caching plugins and things won't work well with that.
Yeah, and just sorry, you were talking about the designing mobile first. I mean, I had a recent experience with a client where I bullied them into actually doing that properly. And this one said, okay, we'll do it. And they got very frustrated of trying to do this mobile site, to design the mobile site.
Yeah.
And they kept coming back and they go, but they're going to launch soon, and it's absolutely beautiful. And they then expanded out and moved it out to desktop, and they went, it was just so easy.
Yeah.
Sorry, if you're going to redesign your site or redo your site, force yourself, even if it's incredibly frustrating and difficult and it takes time, force yourself to do every single page mobile first from a design perspective.
Yeah.
Because you will reap benefits. It's astonishing how good this company site.
Yeah, and you can't say enough. Google is now mobile first, and I know there are a bunch of WordPress plugins which give you an automatic, will make this mobile friendly, and give you a mobile version. That's a road to failure. You can't afford to lean on those crutches. You need to be mobile first.
Yeah, and that's an important point as well. I was talking to Chris Levisic. He was saying, it's a crutch. All these crutches that we've got, we need to have these solutions that are built in. And that's, once again, to come back to Google investing in WordPress, that's what's happening. We've got the PWA, which somebody's asked a question about, and we've got the AMP. We've got these plugins. We've got Tide. Google are going to help us get rid of our crutches, as it were.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, I remember my Trivago days. They were for any feature, any project. We were actually designing for 6 different screen sizes because we love our
wow.
customers. Yeah, we love our customers, and if you love your customers, then Google will start loving you
Oh, I like
automatically,
that.
right? So,
That's a great quote, Nitin.
yeah.
Philosopher.
Yeah, it's my time, right? My 10 minutes, so I can say whatever I want.
Yep.
All right, guys. So now we are running out of time. So I think we won't be able to take any more questions here. But there are a few questions which are not answered here because of time constraints. So you can catch me, Jason, or Jono on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. So now let's say goodbye in SEMrush style, where you can talk about your key takeaway and also share your preferred communication channel where people can reach you with their questions. So, Jason, you want to start?
Great. Well, my 3 key takeaways are what I said right at the beginning. Site speed is going to benefit 3 people or 3 groups of people or 3 entities. You'll make more money. Google, it will be happy. It will make more money. It will reward you. And your users will be happy when they're on the site. You will lose less of them. You will convert more of them. They will be happy and they will maintain a positive opinion of you. Remember that 2-second rule when you walk into a room. It's a 1-second rule on the web. Rule on the web. You want them to love you from the very first second. And if anyone wants to connect with me, Jason M. Barnard on Twitter, hashtag SEO is AEO. That's how you catch my attention the most easily.
That's very good. Thank you so much, Jason, for the wonderful time.
Brilliant. Thank
Jono, it's your turn now.
Awesome. So some tips. Use Google Chrome's Lighthouse tool to measure and get some meaningful stats. Like all the rest, take with a pinch of salt. Definitely use the rest and look at what they tell you, look at the problems they spot, but don't treat it as the truth, or don't just mechanically work through it. Use Lighthouse to understand how your users experience your site. You need to develop a culture of speed. That's really hard and it takes time. This isn't something you just fix. Having said that, if you want a magic bullet, the combination of Cloudflare and a caching plugin like WP Rocket or Auto-Optimize will take care of certainly a lot of the things those tools will find. Things like minify your resources, cache your pages, shrink stuff, defer stuff. It will do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. You'll still need to tweak and tinker, but that will make a huge difference initially. And then the last tip is, I had a 3rd tip. What was it? If all of this is hard and scary and complicated and you're stuck with a site with a mobile version and it's very, very hard to affect this kind of change, look into the AMP plugin. Now, AMP comes with a potentially political cost. There's concerns about Google's involvement in shaping the future of the web, et cetera, et cetera. However, it removes a lot of these considerations for you. It automatically makes your site mobile friendly, automatically makes it load instantly, gives you all the latest standards, comes with a PWA built in, lazy loads all your images, 100 other things, literally at the click of a button. It might not be for everybody. You're gonna come with some constraints on what you can and can't do with your site. But if all of this is too hard, then that's definitely one way you could go to just bypass it all entirely. So go check it out at least.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jono. So it was a pleasure again to host you guys. And that's pretty much we have for today. And for me, I need, I think, another view of this webinar, because it was really hard for me to digest all the cool tips Jono shared today. So I really need to watch it again. And if you're like me, and if you're like me, I would totally recommend you to watch it again and then share with your friends and network. And let's make web faster than ever before together.
Brilliant.
Cool. Then thank you so much, guys, once again, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Cool. Catch you
You're
later.
great, man.
Hey, guys. Bye.